Hey, Kevin here, Skylabs, bringing you another video. Definitely gonna be a fun one. This is gonna be a little bit different than what we normally do, as this is our first sponsored video. We've had several companies reach out over the last few months wanting us to review their headphones or Bluetooth speakers or even kind of cheap turntables, and I don't really have any interest in that, and I don't think you do either, so we just skipped all that. However, U-Turn reached out to us and said, hey, would you be interested in reviewing our new flagship $1,000 Theory turntable? And we said, absolutely. Send us one of those and we'll give you our honest feedback on it. And that's what we're going to do. Stick around. This is going to be a lot of fun. Thank you, U-Turn. We had a blast. And my first impressions with the Theory by U-Turn, taking it out of the box, the first thing I noticed was this is a serious upgrade to the tone arm. And in a lot of ways with the Theory, they've kind of just taken the training wheels off. As in with the Orbit, a lot of things are preset out of the box, like the anti-skate, the cartridge weight. Essentially, you just put the belt on and plug in the power and the audio cables, and you're off to the races. And this is definitely a good thing with the Theory, in you are going to be able to try a lot more cartridges than you would have been able to with an Orbit, as you can adjust the anti-skate. I think this is your upgrade table. You know, maybe you've bought an Orbit or, you know, another entry-level turntable. You realize how much you enjoy vinyl records, and now you realized, okay, I'm ready to invest into the hobby a little bit more. I want to get something that's going to last a long time and something that's going to allow me almost infinite possibilities of different cartridges to put on whatever turntable I'm buying. And I think definitely one of the biggest pros for the new Theory turntable is the selector switch for 33 and 45 RPM. It is very nice to be able to just select which speed you want to play rather than moving the belt to a different pulley position. While a lot of people might not listen to 45 RPM, including myself, I do have some audiophile pressings that are 45 RPM. Sometimes I might just hesitate to reach for one of those records because you do need to kind of fiddle with the belt a little bit in order to play the 45 RPM. And the biggest complaint by far from my customers that have purchased the U-Turn Orbit turntables is they forget that they've left the belt on the 45 spindle and it is stretched out. This is something I try to tell my customers before they purchase a U-Turn, which is never leave it on the 45 spindle. And with the U-Turn Theory, you don't have to worry about that, which is a great improvement in my opinion. The next pro on our list is the feet. We've got some really nice adjustable sorbothane feet. Sorbothane is a material I usually describe to people as it's like a squishy material, kind of rubbery. It's that material that's inside of a wrist rest of a mouse pad. The adjustable feet makes this huge as well, in that in order to set your anti-skate, it is critically important that your turntable is level. Otherwise, not only are you having to compensate for centrifugal force, but you're also having to compensate for your turntable being out of level. So while it might seem like a small thing, having adjustable feet on a turntable, always a plus. Always, always, always. And the next pro for the U-Turn Theory turntable would definitely be the customer service. And this is more brand wide, but it definitely needs to be in the pro category. Not only does the Theory come with a 3-year warranty, but if you do need something or you have a question, U-Turn is very, very good about communication. And this is something I really look for, especially with new product that I sell. And a lot of times I will ask customers that have an issue with any of the products we sell, if they have an issue, to let me know about it. Because I can quit selling a product if I don't feel like my customers are getting good customer support. And after selling U-Turn turntables for this long and this many, we're bound to have a couple customers that have an issue. And I got feedback from every customer that did have an issue, and every one of them said the same thing, which was their customer service is excellent. Another pro for the U-Turn Theory turntable is definitely the fact that you can add an aftermarket lifter, and the Q-Up is a very economical solution We actually did an entire video on different styles of tone arm lifts, and the Theory turntable could use any one of them that we listed in that video. A lot of turntables just don't have the real estate in order to use a Q-up style lifter. This one does. However, with the U-turn, you have a choice. You can either use the queuing lift or a Q-up auto lift at the end of the record. You can't use them both the same time because they take up the same amount of real estate. It's one or the other, but at least you have the option. And another pro for the Theory, or really any turntable by U-turn, would be their pricing on the replacement belts. And I know this sounds trivial. However, I have a Marantz TT15 turntable, and I just had to buy a replacement belt for it last year, 2 years ago. And it was $60 plus shipping. It almost came to $70 for the replacement belt. They can charge that because it is a proprietary belt. You have to buy the belt from them. U-turn is the same way. This is a proprietary belt, whether it's for the Theory or their Orbit line. It's a proprietary belt, and you have to get it from U-turn. Rather than penalizing you and charging you an astronomical amount of money like Marantz does with their belt, they charge $10 for the Theory belt and $7 for the Orbit belt. And I think that is just a testimony to the company to say, hey, look, we appreciate you buying our product. We are not going to roll you over the coals every little chance we can because you have to buy from us. You're supporting them by purchasing their products, and their way of saying thank you is, let's get you those replacement belts to keep your turntable running as long as we can at a cheap price. And the last pro before we get into the cons, the fit and finish is immaculate on this thing. The wood, the finish, the knobs, all the details are there. This is a really nice looking turntable, no question, and it should be, at the price point. So definitely a big pro for the Theory has got to be the fit and finish. Just a really nice, elegant looking turntable. So the first con would be there's no removable head shell. And this is a con for a couple of reasons, and it does make switching cartridges very fast if the head shell is detachable. The other thing it can become an issue with is if you are not very careful when you're changing out the cartridge. You don't know how many times we get calls from people with Regas or Projects, and they say, I was trying to switch out the cartridge and I snapped the wires going to my cartridge. It happens all the time. You just have to be very, very careful. Get yourself a pair of hemostats or really thin needle nose pliers, and you really have to gently remove those wires from the cartridge body when doing this, because you do not want to break those wires off, especially down in the tone arm, because if that happens, then you're in trouble. Even though this was a con for us, some people out there might see it as a pro, in that with a removable head shell, you do have another connection point where wires use a connector to make contact. And anytime you can get rid of a connection point, you're improving the signal of the source. So a lot of people will argue and say, it's going to sound better. There's less chance of introducing outside interference or hum when you bypass the collar system of a removable head shell. So it might be a trade-off to you. I prefer removable head shells. So, and the other con we found for the U-turn Theory would be the RCA cables supplied. These are just really cheap, $3 RCA cables. And at the $1,000 price point, I do think they could supply you with a little bit better set of RCA cables. While their Theory might be, no pun intended, most people that buy a turntable at this price point maybe already have a specific brand of cables they're going to want to use. I do think throwing a $10 pair of RCAs or $15 pair of RCAs in the box would be nice, just because of the price point. All right, how does it sound already, Kevin? Shut up. How does this thing sound? I'll tell you how it sounds. It sounds like a very quiet turntable with a Ortofon blue cartridge on it. Well, then how would it sound with a Grado black on it? Well, it would sound like a really quiet turntable with a Grado black on it. But to be serious, the theory sounds excellent. It sounds great. It sounds like $1,000 turntable. You've got a really nice magnesium tone arm here. You've got a really nice quiet motor. You've got a really nice platter spindle, and everything's there for good vinyl playback and to really show off the sound of your cartridge and the record. And that's what you want. That's what I want from my turntable. And that's what you get with the theory. And we picked a slow Thursday to go ahead and set the theory up. We plugged the theory into the Sony TAE 5450 preamplifier because it's got a really nice phono preamp in it. And then we fed that into a Dynaco 410 amplifier. And then we used a set of ESS Rock Monitor 3s, which were some of my favorite speakers we've had in the store this entire year. Those things sounded phenomenal. And we figured that would be a really good way to give the theory a test and see what we thought. And really the first thing we noticed was this turntable's dead quiet, with no record playing, but the volume on the preamp turned up a really good amount. We weren't getting any noise or any hum. And literally I had just received my Rhino Records Cars remaster that everybody has been praising. I figured it was the perfect first record for the theory. So we put that on the turntable and it sounded incredible, no question. And being there's been so much praise of this new pressing of the Cars record, I didn't want to just give it all to the theory. So what I did was I grabbed an Electropress, brand new out of the record bins, opened that up, put that on, and while it did not sound nearly as good, there was a little bit more surface noise, but I definitely think this has more to do with that pressing than it did the U-Turn's ability to suppress surface noise. And to get rid of the variation of having two different pressings of the same record, I thought, you know what? I've got my 929 here. It's got an Ortophon Blue on it. And I have two brand new copies of Rumors by Fleetwood Mac. So what I did was I went and grabbed my 929. I set it up as the Sony has two phono preamps. It would make it very easy to hot swap and A/B these two turntables with the same cartridge using the same pressing of Fleetwood Mac's Rumors. I sat down on the couch and I occasionally flipped back and forth between the U-Turn Theory and my Sansui 929, and I, for the life of me, could not hear a difference between the two. They both sounded the same. They both sounded very good, and blindfolded, there's absolutely no way I could have picked out which one was which 5 out of 10 times unless I was just getting really lucky. So I definitely think the U-Turn Theory could stand up to almost any really good quality vintage turntable out there. The theory sounds incredible. That's the best way I can put it. And since U-Turn sent a theory with the built-in phono preamp, I definitely wanted to try it out, see if it introduced a lot of noise or hum. So I then plugged the theory into the auxiliary input on the Sony, switched it to the internal preamp. And once I did that, I almost realized I couldn't A/B test it anymore against the 929 because there was a pretty big boost in the output of the built-in U-Turn preamp over the Sony's internal preamp. And A being two turntables and one's 3 dB or 4 dB more than the other one, it's hard not to favor the one that's louder. It's just the way it is. So I didn't do any more A/B testing from there on out. I didn't get any excessive hum. I didn't get any noise from the internal preamp. I think the internal preamp is just fine if you have to have one built in. If you're really wanting to go for getting the most out of your audio, look at getting an external preamp. That's my 2 cents on it. And the video editor here at Skylabs, a good friend of mine, Eric, he definitely listens to more vinyl records than anybody I know. A lot of times I'll say, hey, check out this record, let me know what you think, or check out this piece of equipment, let me know what you think. And Eric, being the nice guy he is, he offered to take the turntable home and put it up against some of his other turntables. And he's got very nice turntables by Empire and Thorns and Techniques and Project and you name it. So I trust Eric's opinion on vinyl playback 100%. And he said he'd gladly give it a listen and give us his thoughts on it as well. And the funny thing about this was Eric took it home on Friday. And because he's got so many nice turntables, I didn't really expect to hear much. I thought I'd see him next week and he'd say, yeah, it was okay. It sounded good, That's what I expected. It was funny because at 11:30 at night that night, I get a text message from him and it just says, I can't believe it. I'm like insanely addicted to this turntable right now. I can't stop playing records on it. I just laughed and figured I'd catch up with him, the next day and talk to him about it. So then I got a call from Eric and he said, it's the weirdest thing, it really grew on me. He found that after playing 6 or 7 records on it, that he really liked the way it interacted. Like he liked the way the tone arm felt. He liked the way the switches felt. He liked the way the tone arm rested back in the tone arm rest. He just said, the details start to come out with this thing the more you use it. At first, I think he thought, it looks really nice. This looks like a nice turntable. But I don't think he was planning on being that excited about it. At this point, I don't see him doing anything other than buying one and adding it to his collection because even talking to him just today, he kind of went on quite a bit saying, I don't know what it is about this thing, but they really thought about all these little things that just make sense. And I really like playing with this turntable. So really interesting. And Eric did have one issue with the theory, and he said he wanted to try the internal phono preamp. So he plugged it into the auxiliary on his tube amplifier, and he was getting some noise and hum. So he decided to use some audio cables by Blue Jeans called LC1s. I don't know anything about them, but he said that completely killed the issue. So do I think the theory is worth the $1,000 price tag that U-Turn is asking for these? Absolutely. I think a really good product by a really good company that has really good customer service and does an exceptional job at what it's supposed to do, there's a lot of value there. And if you look at how cheap technology has gotten over the last 40, 50 years, I mean, this is really a bargain. This really isn't even that expensive of a turntable. If you look at what turntables cost in the 70s, according to the inflation calculator, if you were to take $1,000 of today's money, you'd have $142 of purchasing power in 1973. And that would buy you maybe a mid-grade turntable at best. I think we've gotten so used to disposable technology and electronics that when we see a $1,000 turntable, we think, holy cow, that's insane. That's way too much money. And it really isn't, especially for a turntable. With other pieces of equipment that you might buy new that have a 5 to 7 year life before they become outdated, whether it's because of a new format comes out or compatibility issues. If you think about it, turntables haven't changed ever. We've had 2 speeds as the dominant format since the 50s. And turntables have been for the last 50, 60 years a turning platter, a tone arm, and a cartridge. Really, for the most part, you can take a 1960s cartridge or 50s and put it on a modern turntable and vice versa. They're almost interchangeable. And so if you look at, a turntable like an investment, something that's not going to become outdated, turntables are really delicate. You've got moving parts that need to be perfectly tuned or you're going to start having problems. So spending, $1,000 on a turntable that, could last a really long time, I don't think that's a bad investment at all. So, do I think you can get really good sound from something half the price? Definitely. But, if there's an issue, are you going to get that good customer service? Does it have the fit and the finish? Does it have the engagement that maybe a more premium turntable would have? And if that's not important to you, get the $500 turntable or get the $300 turntable. It doesn't matter. I don't think $1,000 is outlandish for this turntable. I think U-Turn has proved it already with how they price everything, that they're not just in it for the money. This is a small company in the United States that stands by their product. And so, in my opinion, if you live in North America, because U-Turn does only sell to the United States and to Canada, in my opinion, I would buy a U-Turn. If you live overseas, maybe look at Project and Rega. because there's been a lot of times we've had customers here that have problems with Project and Rega, and they have to ship their turntable overseas to get it serviced. Do I think the U-turn destroys Rega and Project? And no, not at all. But I think they compete, and I think the customer service, the build quality, and the fact that they're in the United States pushes them over the top, at least for those reasons for me. And so it might be different for everybody. It definitely is different for everybody, depending on where you live and what you want and what you need. Thank you for making it to the end of another video. Thank you to U-Turn for sending us the theory. We definitely enjoyed it. And I hope everybody has a really good week. I'm going to go get outside now. Thanks.